Ups.
Yeah, and it was 2 different actors, and both of them were screams. There was 2 screams that made me cringe. The first one was when Vipin gets attacked in the swamp. The scream is just like a little weak. It's like when you're like in a public place and someone like dares you to scream and you're really embarrassed that you're gonna be seen with these people.
I just had this image of like the actor in the recording studio, and they're just like, so your scream is a little weak. We brought in this owl. We're gonna throw it at you.
Yeah, and it just didn't work. It did not get better. It's just like a little like he was embarrassed to scream, which I would be embarrassed to scream even like by myself.
Yes, and unfortunately they can't throw a live owl at him. That's something Alfred Hitchcock would do.
And I feel like they probably all recorded this remotely because it was all being recorded during COVID. And the other scream is when Celeste sacrifices herself. I didn't notice it the first time I listened because it's like anticipation. I was on the edge of my seat.
It's an intense moment.
Re-listening, I laughed out loud. It was not a good scream. It was really bad. That's no shade to the actress. Again, I would not be able to do it. And the rest of the performance was great.
It's like I live in an apartment building and my neighbors are gonna call the cops if I shriek.
I think that they should have just like found a stock scream and put it in there.
Just imagine how funny it would be if, like, we're listening to Celeste and then at the end, we get, like, a Wilhelm scream.
Imagine if they put Dean's scream.
Oh my god, they should have.
It's just, like, it's a man either way.
Also, can we talk about, KJ, how, like, during that moment, like, you predicted, like, the entire end of the series, like, 2 days before it happened?
Yeah, I was listening to that and I was like, damn it, she was right.
I will get there at the end. I went and I pulled a bunch of screenshots of my tweets and my texts to all of them.
Yes!
I want to talk first for a bit about the familial connections between Anne and Jeremy, and by extension, Thomas and Shelley.
Oh dear.
Listening back, every response that Anne gives from their very first meeting in episode 1 is very obvious hints as to the true nature of her relationship with Thomas, literally from the first time that they meet. It's an aspect that's incredibly well crafted. I was predicting a relationship between Thomas and Anne pretty early on. I have the screenshot, so when we talk about my screenshots, I will have I'll be able to say I tweeted on a date, on like a specific date. I was like, so yeah, these 2.
You brought the receipts.
Yeah, I did bring the receipts.
When I was listening to it, I think like a few episodes in, I thought, oh gosh, were they in a relationship? Oh no, don't do that to me, please. But like I've warmed up to it now. I get kind of annoyed when they always go the romantic route. This time, I think it worked. I just needed some time to like process it.
Yeah, and adjust.
I think we got a little bit of a like disdain, like kind of a resentment toward Jeremy's mom throughout this entire podcast.
Yeah, that did help.
Yeah, well, I think after Anne said that they started dating, like, after he was separated from his wife.
That helped.
Yeah, and I was just like, okay, I don't like her, but do not cheat on your wife, you jerk.
Yeah, I like when there is, like, a thing to uncover, an aspect of the story that's not really obvious, when you can go back and watch it again, you're like, oh, the clues were here. If I had been looking for them, I would have seen them. I could have put this together. So I like that. It was very satisfying for me to have guessed that correctly. But there are some really early clues. In episode 1, Anne specifies that it's Miss Becker, not Mrs. Becker. She is not and never has been married, which was really interesting. Anne very much believes in the stuff in the woods. She also starts calling Jeremy by his last name in like episode 2, but also says Jeremy is just like his mother. But I just thought it was interesting that she started calling him Bradshaw because it sounded like a lot of people called Thomas Bradshaw at the time. So I wondered if that was her, like, you know, doing the thing where she like puts a little bit of Thomas on Jeremy because, you know, she's trying to replace that.
And then it becomes very obvious that they are not very similar. Well, at least in one aspect.
Yeah. And in episode 2, Anne specifically says that Thomas wasn't himself the night that he went missing. He thought that something followed him too, and then she stops herself. She doesn't say where he was. We find out later where he was and why she didn't want to finish that sentence.
It's like, no, I don't think I want to reveal that this early
but
in the plot.
But it's also a reveal that they were together on the night that he went missing.
When I first listened to it, I did wonder how she knew, but like, I guess I just assumed he called her or something.
Well, they made it seem like they were super close as like partners, but not as like partners.
And then I have a few things about Jeremy and Shelley and their family. It really feels like Jeremy values family, and he longs for that family connection that Shelley and Anne sort of keep from. I mean, it's not Shelley's fault; she doesn't know, but that Anne keeps from him, because in episode 4, when Jeremy and Joe are together, Jeremy is talking to Vipin, and Vipin's like, "Oh, it's like one of those rivalries, like where there is no winner." And Jeremy's like, "Well, I don't know. Joe has a beautiful wife and 2 like beautiful children, so I kind of think he might have won." And he had just been talking about how like he doesn't really have anyone. Also, that made me like Jeremy a lot. That really increased my respect for Jeremy, that he values family so much more than like academic or like career achievement.
Yeah,
because they're both very successful in their careers, but he's like, he's successful in his career and he has this family that I don't have. Jeremy and Shelley first interact in episode 4. They haven't seen each other in about 5 years since a high school reunion. I remember the first time I listened to this, I was like, oh, do Jeremy and Shelley like each other? Is that what this is gonna be? And then, I think the next episode I was like, oh no, never mind.
Don't do that. Don't go down that path. It's like, oh gosh, it's Star Wars.
They're very pleased to see one another. They're excited to see each other for the first time in several years. So that was interesting.
I really hope they develop Shelley a little more in season 2. Because, like, now she's kind of gained some more significance, like, more than she already had.
I don't think Shelley, they didn't have time to tell Shelley in this season, so I don't think Shelley knows yet either.
Yeah, like, they didn't really have time to put her in there and develop her that much, but I do hope they have time next season.
I guess they're just gonna show up with Thomas and be like, this is your dad, by the way.
Why does he look the same age as Jeremy?
It is unclear how old Thomas looks.
That's how old is Nathan Fillion? No. That's not a good measure. It's a podcast.
No, it's not, because Melissa Ponzio is not in her 70s. Also, Anne really has to pretend with Shelley that she no longer believes in all these things, and I think that's part of the reason why she's pushing Jeremy to believe so badly, is because both Shelley and Jeremy don't, and she doesn't really have the option to, like, convince Shelley, because she'll lose her access to Ethan and Olivia, but, like, she really needs Jeremy to believe, because she needs someone.
No grandkids at stake here.
Also, because Thomas believed, at least somewhat, she is looking for that connection with Thomas through Jeremy.
Didn't she say that Thomas was the one who convinced her?
I believe so, yeah.
Yeah, so he believed.
I do believe in fairies.
I do.
Jeremy's mother was so unhappy that he was anywhere near Anne, so much so that for 1 second I was like, did Jeremy's mom kill Thomas? I really for 1 second was like
I think I thought the same thing for a bit. I was like, whoa.
Imagine how hilarious that would be. Like, we're just building up to this, like, big supernatural finish, and we think Thomas vanished because of, like, whatever lake stuff was happening. And it's just like, no, his wife killed him.
I think we had the fleeting thought the first time that she didn't want Jeremy to go see Thomas. I was like, oh, damn. Like, was Anne, like, investigating his, like, disappearance, and did she think that, like, the mom did it? And then I was like, and then, like, when she was really, really angry, I was like, oh, damn, maybe she did do it. Maybe she knows a lot. Maybe she's in the call. And then I was like, okay, no, never mind.
I think she's another character that should be developed a little more. I want to know what her interactions with Anne were like, if she had very many.
I would like to know her name. She's remarried, so I'm assuming her last name isn't Bradshaw anymore, and we don't know her first name. She's just Mom.
That's true. Like, she only interacts with Jeremy.
But even when Anne, like, talks about her, Anne doesn't use her name either.
Yeah, because she's usually talking to Jeremy.
Yeah.
So she's just been, like, Jeremy's mom. She hasn't really been a character on her own.
Episode 8 is when Jeremy started to question how well Anne and Thomas knew each other. In episode 9, when he learns that Shelley never knew her father, he put the pieces together, and we get this beautiful performance from Misha and Melissa. Episode 9 is my favorite episode because it has this scene in it, and I pulled out a bunch of quotes and things I wanted to talk about specifically. When Jeremy asks Anne why she stayed in the house and in Forest, she's like, I have family here, and Jeremy clapped back with, well, so do I, apparently.
That was a good line.
Which was amazing.
Good. I love that.
My heart broke for Jeremy because he clearly wants family in his life so badly and, like, felt so robbed of that.
And, like, finding out this way at this time must have been very damaging.
Even if he had found out at the beginning of the 2 weeks, now we're 2 weeks in and it's much too late to be having this conversation.
Well, I feel for Jeremy in that situation because there was a whole side of my family that I never knew existed until my early 20s. So I I completely understand what he was going through in that moment.
That is, yeah, I can't even imagine. We do find out that Jeremy's mother knew that Shelley was Thomas's, so that's unfortunate because that means his mom was also lying to him. So that means everybody in his life basically has been lying for 40 years. He has no belief system to fall back on and no one to really help him through his time except for Vipin, who does his very best. And that when Thomas disappeared, Anne and Jeremy's mom basically more or less together decided that they were just gonna never tell Jeremy about any of this, which is very upsetting.
I mean, he deserves to know. Even if they waited until he was an adult,
yeah,
at least tell him, at least plan to tell him.
When he moved back to Freetown, he went to California for a bit, and his mom lives in California, and then he moved back to Freetown, so I feel like that's at least then. And they also, he went to high school with Shelley, he knows who Shelley is. Misha says fuck in every tone imaginable in this episode. It's very healing for me to have heard that. Which is beautiful.
Agreed.
It really, the different ways you can say any swear word really change the meaning of it, and they really, sometimes, people are just swearing and it doesn't add anything. I think in this case, each individual fuck added something different, and I really appreciated that.
I really hope Misha Collins does more voice acting after this, because he did so well.
It was excellent. I agree. Jeremy says to Anne, "I'm sure you were just trying to protect me, but that was never your job either. But I could have had, you should have told me," because he is realizing he could have had a family. And then he says, "I have a sister."
I think we learned that he was never really that close with his mom either.
Yeah, I mean...
So, his remaining family didn't feel like a family.
Yeah, he says that things were never the same after his dad went missing. And his dad went missing when he was 5 years old, so, that's a long time for things to be bad.
Yeah.
They get into a little bit of yelling, and Jeremy says, "You can't blame the Bridgewater Triangle for your unhappiness," and Anne shoots back, "Neither can you." And it's been established that Jeremy is kind of unhappy with his life, even before all of this, when he was talking to Vipin about how he's kind of alone, and he doesn't have anything to do, and he's just kind of this, academic. He lives a really boring life with no one to share.
Aw. And that's why his TA is his only friend.
Yeah.
Friend/therapist/ know-it-all.
Thank you, Vipin.
Thank you.
And then he says, "I have a nephew," and Anne's like, "And you have a niece," and Jeremy says, "I don't think I could ever forgive you for this, Anne," and she says, "I know." I love this. It's funny in a sad way, but Jeremy goes, "2 weeks ago I didn't have anything with my father, now I have his badge and an entire family."
It gets better.
And then he says, "You could have had me. You weren't the only one who lost someone. You and me, we could have had each other, Anne." Which I was like, oh boy.
Yeah.
That was something.
And I can't really hate anyone in this situation, because I kind of want to understand where Anne is coming from, too. She should have told him, but, it must have been really hard not to do that.
Also, choosing the right age to tell him, because he was 5 when his father went missing.
Yeah. It couldn't have been easy to, if she had decided to tell him, it wouldn't have been easy, and
no.
I almost understand why she would have avoided it. I don't think it was the right decision, but, I can kind of see where she's coming from.
I wish that Jeremy's mom and Anne had decided for him that he was going to keep at least seeing Anne some of the time, because Anne and Thomas already knew that Anne was pregnant when Thomas went missing. They were already separated, Thomas and Jeremy's mom, and they were already planning to have shared custody of Jeremy, which means that when Thomas went missing, Anne was already stepping into that parental role, and even though Jeremy was 5, that's still old enough to understand a pregnancy and a sibling to some extent.
Yeah, but his mom really seems to hate Anne, and we're not really clear why.
Yeah, we don't really know what exactly the details are with the dissolution of the Bradshaw's marriage.
I feel like they draw attention to this, but it is weird that he doesn't remember any of it.
Yeah, I mean, that could be trauma. Jeremy clearly went through several traumas in a small, short amount of time, between the age of 4 and 5. Yeah. Plus his parents getting divorced, plus his dad then going missing.
I think they imply that, the supernatural stuff can erase your memory.
Yeah, because everybody seems to have memory issues that goes missing in the forest.
Yep.
So there is some stuff there. But if they had just kept at least maybe not full custody or weekend visits or anything, but just kept this communicate line of communication open for Jeremy, he would have had the chance to get to know at least his sister.
Yeah.
And they just took that away from him. So I'm on to pivot slightly. The show is interesting because there is a lot of Indigenous, Native American elements to the story, but the show kind of does a good job at having an underlying discourse about it as it's happening.
Yeah, I really liked that.
About who these stories belong to and what happens to them when other people use them when it's not their place. So there's several Wampanoag stories. The Pukwudgie story is also, I don't know which group of peoples that belongs to, but it is like a indigenous story. There's a big discourse on the naming of the children of Tituba.
Oh my gosh, I was so happy they included that, because when I heard Tituba, I was like, are you serious? You're naming your creepy Satanist cult